families. This week on Community Chat, Hagen Nares Truck Wreck and Brain Injury Lawyers is speaking with medical malpractice attorney Allison Pritchard. She is here to share her journey to specializing in medical malpractice, how she proves a medical malpractice case, and a training tidbit for the community. Full disclosure, I love Allison. She is a dear friend of mine, and I wouldn't recommend anybody else but her for these medical malpractice cases. But there's a lot to learn. And so I want her to share information to the community at large about these cases. But first and foremost, how do you even get involved in medical malpractice cases? What's your journey?
So funny. My journey is literally just luck. I went to law school to be an environmental attorney. And that's obviously not what I'm doing now. I took the first job I could when I got out of law school, and it was a boutique personal injury firm that specialized in ski collisions, so ski law and medical malpractice. And it was the greatest experience of my life. I loved the firm extensively, still do. They're terrific attorneys. And my first trial was with the senior partner, and we had a medical malpractice case. It was a doctor who left a foreign body inside a patient. So we ended up losing that case, but that just really reinforced for me how complicated medical malpractice cases are. And I think when I went out on my own and had my own firm for 4 years, I didn't have any med mal cases. I had premise liability, motor vehicle. And then when I decided to join forces with Sean Olson, who is the owner of the firm I'm at now, he is just one of the most brilliant attorneys I've ever met, and he is big into medical malpractice. So I was able to re-enter this area that I loved. Both my parents are registered nurses. So I have doctors in my family. I have registered nurses. I have a slew of medical professionals. I don't like blood. I can't, I'll pass out. Like, you want me in a surgery room? No, you don't want me in a surgery room. I'm a liability. So I decided I really found that I loved the medical side of the law, improving a case and looking at the standard of care and looking at the damages and just finding these intricacies within the medical fields that I have in my cases. That's what drew me to the case. So that's how I got into it, literally luck.
I really appreciate you sharing that journey, because it then gets into the next question, which is, how on earth do you prove a medical malpractice case? Now, clearly having the background of the entire family in the medical field is going to help in that. But there is a complicated standard, and I'm going to say the vast majority of people have no idea if something is a case or not. So can you just let us know, how do you even do one of these cases? What are you looking for? How can people get an understanding of, do they even have a possible case to call you on?
Yeah. So the biggest thing with medical malpractice is being able to prove that there was a breach in the standard of care that a doctor was supposed to, adhere to. So, I mean, the best way to put it is, well, I'm trying to think about this. So, let's say that we have a gallbladder case, right? And so it's a gallbladder removal surgery, and a lot of those happen laparoscopically. So it's called a laparoscopic cholecystectomy. When you have these types of laparoscopic procedures for removal of the gallbladder, there is a certain standard of care with what the surgeon needs to be doing in order to identify the correct anatomy intraoperatively, to identify where they're clipping. And when they don't follow that procedure, that's when you can run into issues. So part of the standard of care for these cholecystectomy cases is that the doctor has to identify what's known as the triangle of Callot, which is an anatomy. It's part of our anatomy, and that's where you can see the common bile duct, the hepatic duct. I mean, it's the anatomy right in there. And if you don't have a clear visualization of these intricate ducts, which are critical to, if they're leaking, you have bile leaking within you. If you don't have this critical view, you're supposed to convert the surgery to open, or a surgeon is supposed to convert it to open. And so, that's just one example. But a lot of people will call me and say, well, we're really unhappy with how the nurse treated us or how the doctor treated us. And it is upsetting when someone has poor bedside manner, but it's not necessarily malpractice. And so when I get these types of calls, we're really looking at, okay, what was the standard of care? What was a surgeon supposed to do or a doctor supposed to do? And can we prove that that supposed to do was deviated from? So that's where we get our cases. Now, there are cases where doctors and nurses and surgeons will deviate from a standard of care, and that's very, blatantly clear. Let's say that you're allergic to a substance, and the nurse practitioner who's doing a biopsy or a shot or something cleans that area or disinfects that area with a disinfectant that contains what you're allergic to, and you have a subsequent allergic reaction that requires an ER visit. Yes, that's likely a breach because it says right in your allergy chart what you're allergic to, and they just ignored it, but you don't have damages. And so damages is another really important aspect of a medical malpractice case because, if you have a $5,000 hospital bill, that's a lot of money. Like, to me, $5,000 is a ton of money. In the grand scheme of things, though, it's not enough to bring a medical malpractice case because when you take a trial or when you take a case to trial, just expect that it's going to cost between $50,000 to $75,000 to get all the way to a jury. And when I accept a medical malpractice case, I have it in my mind that I'm taking that bad boy to trial. Whether I try the candor process, whether I try to settle it, I prep my case like I'm going to trial so that I can give my clients the most informed, information. So long story short, the best way to determine, and really the only way to determine whether or not you have medical malpractice, is a breach of the standard of care. And it's a lot of research. It's time intensive. We have to talk to experts. Whenever you file a case in Colorado, you have to have a certificate of review. And that has to be present in the complaint itself, that you consulted with a doctor within the same field as the doctor that you're arguing is negligent. So, we spend a ton of money up front just getting experts to tell us, yes, we believe that there's a breach of the standard of care, and yes, there is causation from the breach of standard of care.
I really appreciate that. And a lot of people may be asking, why is a personal injury attorney, myself, talking to you about this? Isn't it all personal injury? And the answer is no. This is a very specialized field of personal injury. You really need to be an expert in this. And so in the training tidbit section, I would love for you to just share something to the community about why these are so specialized, why you really need someone that doesn't dabble in medical malpractice, that this is really what they do, the firm specializes it in, and why that's so important.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have or to go with an attorney who either has done medical malpractice before or is in a firm with attorneys that do medical malpractice regularly, because there's so many intricacies to a medical malpractice case, and there's so much substantive law in Colorado regarding protections that hospitals and doctors have, what's protected in discovery, what we can and cannot get, just deadlines. Deadlines are different. The statute of limitations is 2 years. So that's, similar to other statutes of limitations. But then you get into hospitals. Is the hospital governmental immunity? Is it not? Who is the provider? How can you go after the provider versus the hospital? Can you even go after the hospital? So there are just so many different intricacies. And so I would say, really the best tip is when you're researching your attorney, look at the website, look at the verdicts that they have gotten, how many med mal cases they've gotten, and just do your due diligence around research, because these are very specialized cases. And it's so hard in this area to have imposter syndrome, right? Because there are so many mind-boggling good attorneys in the medical malpractice realm. and they're few and far between. So I would say we have a handful of attorneys that I will refer cases to when I feel like I can't specialize in, or I don't know enough about a topic. I tell the potential client to go to another firm because I just don't know enough about that subject. So I think, doing your due diligence about the firm, but also having an attorney that recognizes that they don't know what they don't know is pretty important, because while you're learning every single day, I think you don't want someone who's just learning how to do a medical malpractice case. I have no idea why it does that, right? The thumbs up.
It just thumbs up that pointer. No, I really appreciate it. And obviously, I can't end this discussion without educating the community about the very unique thing about medical malpractice cases, which is it's capped. People have no idea what that means. So if you can share and give some insight, I think that would be really great for the community to learn about.
Well, and it's so important right now because we have a ballot initiative coming up in November. And this is not just for medical malpractice caps, it's for all caps, but it really affects every Coloradan. So in Colorado, it's been around for about 40 years. There is a non-economic damages cap on medical malpractice cases of $300,000. Which is archaic, but it is what it is right now. So what that means, and I'm sure that you have informed everyone about this, but there's economic damages and non-economic damages. Non-economic damages are pain, suffering, just what you go through on a daily basis when you lose a loved one or have gone through just horrific adverse reactions when you've had a procedure or something. So the best way that I can put it is, let's say that a loved one goes into a hospital for a routine procedure and the procedure goes well, right? The surgery goes well, but then after the surgery, your loved one starts having complications, and you and your family bring up those complications to the nursing staff, to the attending, but they're not doing anything about it. And it turns out that those complications, because they weren't caught, end up killing your loved one. And I wish that this was not as common as I have found that it is, but it's common. And your loved one dies, you can only get $300,000. That's it. I mean, potentially you can get the medical bills, but if the hospital waives their billing, if they get denied by health insurance and then they decide not to pursue it, you don't have any economic damages. So all you can get for your loved one's life is $300,000.
And am I correct? That's regardless of what a jury gets.
Yeah. Let's say that you file a lawsuit and you go all the way to trial, right? So your costs, because you still have to hire a standard of care expert and a causation expert, and if they're not the same, then those are two different doctors. Let's say that you go all the way to trial and you incur $70,000 in expenses getting to a jury, and the jury gives you $2.5 million or more. It's knocked down. It's knocked down to $300,000. And that's because that cap is statutory. So it's disheartening because it's taking that power and that job away from the jury. So this November, we're going to the ballot, Coloradans for Accountability. And they have a website. It's a terrific website. They're stepping up and they're saying, we don't want these. We as Coloradans do not want these caps anymore. They defeat the jury's right to award damages based on the evidence, not just the evidence from the plaintiff, but evidence from the defendant too. So I haven't seen something like this in my near decade of being an attorney. And I just think we have so much momentum, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. So for anyone who's interested, Coloradans for Accountability, it is it's the ballot measure that will, allow the juries the right to do their job.
Well, that is excellent. I'm going to include all your personal information in the show notes, and then the link to Coloradans for Accountability as well in the show notes. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for sharing all your insight. And obviously, anybody that has a question regarding medical malpractice, I very much urge you to call Allison. She will give you the guidance as to whether it's a possible case or not. And like she said, you will have a benefit of calling Allison, because if it's a case she cannot take, she will get you to a great referral source. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much, Allison.
Of course.